Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm here to discuss with you our end of year question paper. So it's a revision for history and the social sciences. Remember, for this end of year, we have 75 marks. We have the 35. The 35 will be in section A. Section A meaning that is term 3 work, and then the 40 in section B, which is term 4 work. Okay, so let's go through the question paper. All right. So remember our section A. Remember in history, we have all the sources. They give us a source. So definitely, if they ask you to use the source and your own knowledge, you need to use the source and then you also apply your own knowledge. So our first source is a picture of the Berlin Conference in 1884 to decide how to divide Africa between leading European powers. All right, so when you look at that source A, written in is the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885. All right. So you can see other European leaders in that conference. Remember, the aim of that conference was to divide Africa between the leading European powers. So let's look at our question 1.1.1. What was the name of the conference that met to discuss how Africa was divided? Yes, the name of the conference, definitely it's given to you there. So meaning that if such a question comes, everyone has to get it right, because the name of a conference is given to you there, which is the Berlin Conference. So you come and write it here. Berlin Conference was the name of the conference where these African leaders came to divide Africa into different parts. Right. So let's see. All right. What was the name of the prime minister shown holding a knife in the conference? Yes. The name of that prime minister was a prime minister of Germany and was called Otto. That prime minister was called Otto von Bismarck. The prime minister that you see holding a knife trying to divide Africa into different parts, that prime minister was from Germany and was called Otto von Bismarck. All right, so explain in one sentence what was the conference. Explain in one sentence. Let's go call him. I don't know what's happening. So I need to put this down. Who called him? Okay. It's fine. It's fine. All right. Explain in one sentence what was this conference in Berlin? Was it explain in one sentence what this conference in Berlin was all about. All right. So this conference was all about to divide Africa between leading European powers. That was the aim of the conference, was to divide Africa between the leading European powers. So it was to divide Africa. That was the aim of the Berlin Conference. Explain why Africans thought that what happened to this conference was unfair. Let's see. So Africans thought that what happened at this conference was unfair because, firstly, they were not invited to the conference and they did not agree with colonization, which made them lose many things. They did not agree. Africans did not agree to the conference, whatever was discussed in the conference, because first and foremost, they were not invited to the conference and they did not agree to whatever was made or discussed in the conference, because it made them lose a lot of things. That's why they did not That's why that conference was unfair to them. First, they were not invited to the conference. Secondly, they did not have a say in whatever was agreed to the conference, and they lost a lot of things. Let's look at question 1.2, which is patterns of colonization. You use source 1B below and your own knowledge to answer the questions. Yeah, when you look at source 1B is a map of Africa after it had been divided by the European powers at the Berlin Conference in 1884. So this map in front of you, it shows Africa after the division by the colonial powers. So here it shows us the key. Every time they give you a map, you need to look at the key. When you look at the key, you know who occupied which part of Africa. So the key gives you the land occupations of different parts of Africa. First and foremost, let's look at question 1.2.1. It says, what is colonization? All right. So when you talk about colonization, it involves taking control of land and the people living on it. And it is usually by force. So here you can give your own definition as a learner. But colonization, it involves taking control of the land, and this was usually done by force. So you can also give your own understanding your own understanding about colonization is. Right. So which European power colonized most of African countries? That European power that colonized most of African countries was called British. It was British. British colonized most of the colonized most of the African countries. What are the areas the Europeans took over called? Those areas that Europeans took over are called colonies. Find the Gold Coast on the map. Yes, right? You find the Gold Coast on the map. Which European country colonized it? All right. So, when you look at the Gold Coast on the map, which European country colonized the Gold Coast on the map? So you look here for the Gold Coast on the map, and then you tell us which European country colonized the Gold Coast on the map. And also, there is a question that poses, why do you think they might have given it this colony? Why do you think they might have given it, this colony, this name? All right. So, they gave it the name of Gold Coast because this colony was rich with gold and it was near the coast. That's why they gave it a name of the Gold Coast, because it was rich in gold and it was near the coast. Question 1.2.5. Mention 3 reasons why European powers were able to colonize Africa quickly. The first reason was rival. There was rivalries between between African countries. Yes. Meaning the African countries did not, they were fighting one another, rivalries between African countries. And also you talk about the natural disasters, like droughts, natural disasters, like drought. You talk about the invasion of machine guns made them to colonize Africa so quickly. And also you talk about the new diseases. You also talk about diseases. The new diseases also made them to colonize Africa so quickly. So now we're looking at the results of colonization. Use source 2A and source 2B below and your own knowledge to answer the questions that follow. Source A is an extract of and is from the biography of an African leader, sum up what happened as a result of colonization of Africa. Let's look at source A. When the missionaries came to Africa, when we opened them, okay, when the missionaries came to Africa, when we opened them, we had that they had the Bible and we had the land. Bible, they said, let us pray. We closed our eyes. Okay. When the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They said, let's pray. We closed our eyes. When we opened them, we had the Bible and they had the land. Say, source B. I would say colonialism is a wonderful thing. It spread civilization to Africa before they had no written languages, no will as we know it, no schools, no hospitals, not even normal clothing. Okay, so you look at both the sources and then you answer the questions that follow. Right, let's look at question 2.1. Let's look at question 2.1. Read source 2A and explain what point of view does it have on the colonization. All right, so the point of view that source A has on colonization is a negative point of view of colonization. He or she felt that they were robbed and were sold the Bible in an expense of their land. Because the source says, when the Europeans came, they had the Bible, we had the land. When they said, let's close our eyes let's close our eyes and pray, they closed their eyes. And then when they opened their eyes after the prayer, the Africans had the Bible and the Europeans had the land. So definitely, this one is a negative point of view of colonialism. What point of view does source 2A have of colonialism? It has a positive point of view of colonialism because in this, he or she says colonialism was wonderful and brought Africa many good things. For example, it brought Africa schools, it brought Africa hospitals, and also normal clothing. So source A portrays a positive picture on colonialism. Explain why the views in source 2A and source 2B are different. Here you can tell us that the comment on source C was made by an African and the comment on source D was made by an European. That's why they are different, the views. An African made the comment in source A and then the European made the comment in source B. Africa lost many things after colonialism or colonization. Mention 3 results of colonization. Since here there is some space, I can write the results of colonization. For example, loss of land, Africans lost their land. I can talk about the loss of land. A loss of land. Africans lost their land. You can also talk about Africans had to work for wages, had to work for low wages. Those are results of colonization. They had to work for low wages. And then you can also talk about that. There was creation of artificial borders. There was creation of artificial borders. And also you can talk about there was loss of natural resources. Loss of natural resources. So those are some of the results of colonization. Loss of natural resources, There was loss of land. Africans had to work for low wages, and also they created artificial borders. Now let's go to the Ashanti Kingdom. Use source 3A and use in your own knowledge to answer the questions. Let's look at source 3A. Shows how the Ashanti resisted British attempts to colonize the Gold Coast. It is taken from General History of Africa under colonial domination, 1880 to 1935, edited by Bahen in Paris. Let's see, source 3A. Now, where in Africa had there been a longer tradition of confrontation between Africans and Europeans than in the Gold Coast? Between the Ashanti and the British. This started in 1760s and culminated in the military engagement in 1824, in which the Ashanti forces defeated the British forces and their allies and killed their commander, Sir Charles McCarthy, the then governor of the Gold Coast. 2 years later, the British revenged this defeat at the Battle of Dodowa in 1850 and 1863. War was narrowly averted, but between 1869 and 1872, the Ashanti eventually attacked and occupied all the southern and coastal areas of the Gold Coast. To beat back the Ashanti, the British government launched one of the best organized campaigns of the period under the command of one of the most famous British officers, Governor Garnett. Armed with the latest weapons, this army succeeded in pushing the Ashanti army to across the Para River. This decisive defeat of the Ashanti by the British in 1874 had very far-reaching consequences and was to influence to a great extent the reactions of the period 1880 and to 1900. The first obvious effect was the disintegration of the Ashanti Empire. By the Treaty of Fomena, the Ashanti recognized the independence of all the vassal states south of the Para River. Let's look at the questions. In which year did Ashanti defeat British? Ashanti defeated British in 1824. Ashanti defeated British in 1824. At which battle did the British defeat the Ashanti? They defeated the Ashanti at the Battle of Dodoma. At the Battle of Dodoma. Name the leader of the British during the Ashanti defeat. The leader was Governor Garnett. The leader was Governor Garnett. Governor Garnett. That was the leader during the Ashanti defeat. Which advantage did the British have over the Ashanti forces? The advantage was the British were armed. They had armed weapons. Mention the two results of the British colonization of the Gold Coast. First, the Ashanti people lost independence. Secondly, they lost their gold treasures. They lost gold treasures. The Ashanti people lost their gold treasures. And then thirdly, people had also to work for low wages. So now in a paragraph of 8 lines, explain the role that Ya Asantewa played in the Ashanti Kingdom. So in your paragraph, you need to talk about the following. You need to have a topic sentence. 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 You need to have a supporting information and also concluding statement. All right. So when you're writing your paragraph, you need to explain the role of the Ashanti in your paragraph, that the role that Ashantewa played in Ashanti Kingdom. All right. So in question 3.2, in this paragraph, you can start your paragraph like this. You can say, Ya Asantewa was the king's mother, the Asantewa. You can also talk about the queen mother. Ya Asantewa was very important to the Ashanti people because she represents the wealth that lies in the region. Also, she was an intellectual, a politician, huge rights activist, a queen, and a war leader. Ya Ashantewa became famous for commanding the Ashanti kings in the War of the Golden Stool against British colonial rule to defend and protect the independence of the Golden Stool. So those are some of the points that you can talk about in your explanation when you're talking about the role of Ya Asantewa that she played. All right. So then let's look at World War I. This is a topic that you have in Term 4, which is Section B. The World War I, Section B, like I said, it's out of 40 marks. All right, let's look at question 4. Use source 4A and your own knowledge to answer the following questions. Source A4 is a map that shows the countries that fought each other in World War I. So World War I, it started in 18, World War I was from 1914 to 1918, meaning it lasted for 4 years. So here we are going to look at the two participants under World War I. All right. So when you look at this map here, we have those that were under the Allied powers. Then we have the Central powers, and we also have those ones that were neutral, meaning they could fight under the Allied or they could go under the Central powers. All right. So let's see the questions. In which year did World War begin? Yes, World War began in 1914. World War began in 1914. How many years? It lasted for 4 years. Name the two countries that formed the Allied powers at the beginning of the war. Those countries, there was France, there was Italy, and there was France, Italy, and Russia. These ones formed the Allied powers at the beginning of the war. Name the two countries that formed the Central powers. Yes, the Central powers, it was Germany. It was Germany. It was Turkey. And we have Australia. We have Australia. Why was it called a world war? Right, here you give a reason why it was called a world war. It was called a world war because the colonies of both the Allied powers and the Central powers also took part in the war. That's why it was called a world war, because the colonies of both the Central Power and the Allied powers, they also took part in the war. That's why it was called the World War. Right, let's move on. And then let's look at the experience in World War One, the aspects of the experiences in World War One. All right, you use source 4C below, use it and your knowledge to answer the following questions. Source 4C is a propaganda poster during World War One, which is an anti-German propaganda poster produced in United States. Let's look at source 4C. This poster shows the destroy this mad brute. Right. We have our questions under here. The first one says, define the word propaganda. All right. When you talk about propaganda, is bias. When you are biased, or it's biased, or it can be misleading information used to promote a political cause. So, propaganda is biased, or you can call it misleading information. And it's used to promote a political what? Cause. That is propaganda. All right. In Britain during World War, what were propaganda posters used for? Mention 3. Propaganda posters were used. Mention 3, the propaganda posters. In Britain during World War, what were propaganda posters used for? 1, they were used to portray that Germans were evil. They were used to portray that men had a duty to fight for food to fight for good, which were the Britain, against the bad Germans. Men had a duty to protect women. Those are the 3 things that the propaganda posters were used for. 1, Germans were evil. Men had a duty to fight for good against the bad. And also men had a duty to protect women. All right. Let's see. How has German been shown in the poster? When you look at the poster, German has been shown as a gorilla. It has been shown as a mad brute. And also that was out to get everyone. So Germany has been shown as a gorilla, mad brute that was out to eat, or that was out to get everyone. How do you think the women represent? Explain your answer. All right. When the women represent Allied powers, USA, the women had been abducted. The women experience. Okay, who do you think the women represent? Definitely the women represent the Allied what? Allied powers. They represented the Allied what? Powers, which was USA. And also, when you explain your answer, you say that the women had been abducted, and they had abducted and they were put in a figure of Lady Liberty. So that's how you can explain your answer. That they were portraying a figure of Lady Liberty. Right. Let's look at the women in Britain during World War One. You use source D to answer the questions. All right. Let's see who was Emmeline Pankhurst. Okay. Emmeline Pankhurst, she was a leader fighting for women in Britain. She was a leader fighting for women in Britain. What was Emmeline trying to ensure for women in Britain? She was trying to ensure that women were treated fairly and had the right to vote. That is what she was fighting for. What made the suffragette movement, which started off peacefully, to become more militant? In order, they wanted to raise awareness and ensure action indeed taken. So, in order to raise awareness and ensure action is indeed taken. Which laws were Emmeline often jailed for disobeying? The laws of land, the laws Let's look at essay writing. Write an essay about 1 page in which you decide the experience the soldiers faced during the World War in trenches during World War I. Your essay should include when did the war start, how long the war started, the condition in the trenches, and your essay must be written in the following form. There should be an introductory paragraph, supporting paragraph, and concluding. So in your introduction, you can start by saying, there have been 2 world wars in history. During the First World War I, the countries Britain, France, Italy, and Russia fought against Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey. Britain, France, Italy, and Russia were called Allied powers. In Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey were called Central Powers. The First War started in 1914. At first, both sides, Allied and Central, thought the war would last only for a few months. However, the war lasted for a few years. In 1918, when the war ended, people referred to the war as the war to end all the wars. There were many horrors in the war. One of the horrors was trench warfare. So that is how you can start your introduction. And in your body, you can include the trench warfare. Men on Western front lived and fought from trenches dug into ground. The trenches were long, open tunnels that ran parallel to each other. They were usually around 2 meters deep and 2 meters wide. They had barbed wire to prevent the enemy from getting into the trench. You can also talk about in your body that soldiers had to live in the trenches for months. The trenches were usually very wet and muddy. The soldiers became sick. The sickness was made worse because dead bodies in no man's land would be dragged into trenches and left and buried for a long time. If the soldier was hit by a bullet or a bomb, his wound was likely become infected. More men died from these infections than the wounds themselves. There were many rats, lice, and other pests in the trenches. Many developed trench foot from having to stand in the mud for long periods of time. Even after the war, soldiers were never the same after living in such bad conditions during World War I. So, and in your conclusion, you can say, in 1918, World War I ended and Central Powers were defeated. Millions of people died. Soldiers who lived in trenches suffered from shell shock. Shell shock is a form of mental breakdown caused by constant death, comrades bleeding in misery, and noise, gunfire around them. Apart from death and mental illness, the war caused poverty, suffering, chaos, and economic collapse. So that's how you can conclude your essay. So and then section B is out of 40 and section A is out of 35, which covers 75. which covers 75.